Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. This time, we're going to try to make sense of what's happening in the crazy world of crypto. And luckily, we've got paralogic.com to help us out today. It's like a roadmap for all things crypto. Really gives you a sense of what's hot and what's not. Just skimming through Paralogic, Bitcoin ETFs, and the pin thing seem to be popping up everywhere. What about you? Anything grabbing your attention?
Oh, definitely. Those are the big headlines for sure. But what I'm really finding interesting is this kind of underlying tension I'm seeing. It's like cryptocurrencies going through these growing pains as it tries to become more mainstream.
Let's get into it. So first off, this BlackRock Bitcoin ETF is just exploding. It hit $30 billion in holdings, like less than a year, which is wild.
It really is remarkable. Yeah. I mean, just a few years ago, nobody could have imagined a company like BlackRock even touching Bitcoin. But here we are, and I think it shows how much more comfortable big institutional investors are becoming with crypto, and that could be a huge deal for the entire financial system.
And get this, all the U.S. Bitcoin ETFs combined are close to holding 1 million Bitcoin. That's a lot of digital gold.
Yeah, it really speaks to the idea that Bitcoin is becoming more of a legitimate asset class, not just for speculation.
Okay, let's switch gears for a second and talk about this DePin thing. Paralogic featured a podcast on it, and it honestly sounded like something out of a sci-fi movie to me. Can you break it down a little?
Sure. So DePin stands for Decentralized Physical Infrastructure Networks. Basically, it's using blockchain, which is the tech behind Bitcoin, to build and manage infrastructure in the real world.
So like instead of relying on these big corporations for internet access, we could have decentralized networks powered by crypto.
Exactly. It could completely change how we access essential services. Imagine, internet access powered by a network of users instead of one company. That's the kind of future DePin is aiming for.
So we've got all this institutional money flowing into Bitcoin, and DePin is trying to connect crypto with the real world. But Paralogic also highlighted this crypto analyst, Willy Woo, who's predicting weaker altcoin seasons going forward. Can you explain what an altcoin season is for anyone who doesn't know?
Think back to 2020. Bitcoin surged. Then suddenly all these DeFi tokens like Aave and Uniswap just exploded in value. That's a classic altcoin season, basically when cryptocurrencies other than Bitcoin see huge growth. We've seen these cycles before, and, they can be very lucrative, but also incredibly risky.
So is Willy Woo saying that getting rich off some random altcoin is over?
It's not so much that it's over, but more that the market is maturing. As crypto gets more widely adopted and attracts more mainstream investors, the focus might move away from pure speculation and towards projects that have real-world use cases.
Yeah, that makes sense. You're not going to convince someone new to crypto to invest in something called Doja Rocket Moon just because it went up 1,000% last week.
Right, so we might see less of those crazy pumps and dumps and more emphasis on projects that are building something tangible and solving real problems. That shift towards utility is really important.
Okay, before we wrap up this first part, let's touch on a few other things that caught my eye in Paralogic. Crypto.com, overtaking Coinbase, Bitwarden facing backlash, and even concerns about AI-generated content in healthcare. What's the deal with all of that?
Well, the crypto.com news is pretty significant. It might signal a change in who's really in charge in the crypto exchange world, especially with all the regulatory issues Coinbase has been having lately. Definitely something to keep an eye on.
And what about Bitwarden? What's going on there?
So Bitwarden, it's a popular password manager, is facing a lot of pushback from the open source community because of changes to their licensing. It kind of shows the challenges that happen when companies built on open source principles try to balance their business with what the community expects. It's a tricky spot for them.
Okay, last one. AI creating content in healthcare. That sounds like we're heading straight into a dystopian movie.
It is a valid concern, yeah. AI tools, like OpenAI's Whisper, have huge potential for, transcription and analysis in healthcare. But finding out that they can actually fabricate content raises some serious ethical questions about how reliable and trustworthy the information is. The implications of that are huge. And speaking of unsettling, Paralogic also mentioned some tensions surrounding Tether, that stablecoin pegged to the US dollar. What's the latest there?
Tether? Yeah, there always seems to be some kind of drama swirling around it. What's going on this time?
Well, there have always been questions about how transparent Tether is about its reserves, like what assets are actually backing up those Tether tokens. And now there's talk of a U.S. investigation, which is adding fuel to the fire.
So is Tether about to collapse and take the whole crypto market with it? That's kind of scary.
I think it's important to not jump to conclusions. There's a lot of speculation going around. The CEO of Tether actually addressed these concerns at a recent event, but whether that's enough to satisfy the skeptics is another question. It's definitely a situation to watch.
For sure, a developing story. On a lighter note, Paralogic also talked about Apple going all in on AI with some big changes coming to iOS and macOS.
Yeah, Apple is really trying to bake AI into everything they do. They're calling it Apple Intelligence, which sounds pretty fancy. The focus is on personalized experiences and making things easier, all powered by AI, of course.
So does that mean my iPhone will finally stop suggesting I call my ex? That AI seems a little off, you know?
Well, we can hope. But seriously, this is a big move from Apple. They're usually pretty careful about adopting new tech, so this shows how important they think AI is going to be.
Speaking of big moves, Paralogic also mentioned that WhatsApp is rolling out some new privacy features.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. They've got this thing called Identity Proof Linked Storage, or IPLS for short. Basically, it's supposed to protect your contact info by encrypting it and storing it separately from WhatsApp's servers.
So even if WhatsApp gets hacked, our contact list is safe.
That's the goal, yeah. It's a response to all the concerns about data privacy and big platforms being targets for hackers. A good step in the right direction, I think.
All right, so we've talked about Bitcoin ETFs, DePin, Tether drama, Apple's AI push, and WhatsApp's privacy moves. Anything else in Paralogic we should cover before we wrap up our crypto deep dive?
Well, there was one more thing that caught my eye, a report about Chinese hackers targeting telecom providers in the US and Canada. It's a reminder that the cybersecurity landscape is always changing and that critical infrastructure is still a prime target.
Cybersecurity is such a rabbit hole. You know, after all this tech talk, I think my brain needs a break. How about you? Ready to explore something a little more fun?
Yeah, lead the way. I'm all for a change of pace.
Yeah, I hear you. I need a break too. So, thinking about these big interconnected systems, Paralogic mentioned something that caught my eye. It was about this whole tokenization trend, where they're putting real-world assets like real estate or even art on the blockchain. What's the deal with that?
Tokenization is really interesting. It's basically like creating a digital version of a physical asset. Like imagine owning a piece of a famous painting or part of a fancy condo, but instead of having a deed or the actual artwork, you have a token that proves you own it, and it's all on the blockchain.
Okay, I get it. But why would someone want a token instead of a regular deed or certificate? What are the advantages?
Well, one big thing is that it lets more people invest in these assets. Like, you don't need millions of dollars to buy a luxury condo or an expensive painting anymore. You can buy a tiny piece of it represented by these tokens. Plus, all the transactions become much more efficient and transparent because they're all recorded on the blockchain.
So it's all about accessibility and efficiency. But wouldn't there be some challenges too? Like, how do you make sure that the token is actually connected to the real-world asset?
That's a really good question, and that's where it gets tricky. You need really strong legal frameworks and ways to verify that the tokenization is legit and secure. There's still work to be done there, but it's definitely a space to watch.
It sounds like tokenization could change everything, not just for investors, but how we think about ownership in general. It's like the whole idea of property is becoming digital.
Exactly. It makes you wonder about the future of assets, investments, and even how we'll interact with the physical world in the future.
Okay, before we wrap up, I gotta ask, what's your big takeaway from all of this? What's the one thing you want listeners to really think about?
I think it's that crypto isn't just about digital currencies anymore. It's changing finance, technology, and even how we interact with the world. Whether it's institutions buying Bitcoin, DePin changing infrastructure, or the crazy possibilities of tokenization, it's clear that crypto is here to stay, and it's going to have a big impact on all of us.
Well said. Paralogic really gave us a great look at what's happening in this crazy, fast-moving world. It's been a fun ride, and I really encourage everyone listening to dig a little deeper, do your own research, and see what gets you excited in the world of crypto. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring.